You know, if this hadn't happened, a lot of people believe that Putin may not have invaded Ukraine. I don't believe that the scene you're watching right now, would have unfolded had President Trump remained in office. What a tragedy. 1 year ago, this was all going down, and nobody seems to be talking about it or particularly concerned with it. I very much admire, though, our next guest, former Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller, United States Marine Corps, spent a long time in active duty, stints overseas, including in Afghanistan and Iraq. Lieutenant Colonel Scheller achieved fame. He resigned in the most spectacular way. More on that in a moment. But welcome back, sir. How are you?
Greg, thanks for having me back on.
You have a book coming up. We'll get to that in a moment. But a year later, what are you thinking? And have you noticed what I'm seeing? Very little in the way of retrospectives. This was such a big deal. I think everything changed, and I'm not sensing much concern.
Yeah, I actually saw General McKenzie went on Morning Joe, and he did an HBO show too as well, and no one's actually asking him tough questions like, why did you not push back on the president when he asked you to withdraw all troops before American citizens? It's a common sense question. No one seems to ask him that. Why did you decide to evacuate Bagram Air Base at the end of June, 3 months after you started planning the evacuation? And there's just a ton of questions that's not being asked. And I agree with you, Greg. There's not a lot of emphasis on the accountability that we need of our senior leaders, and it's a little disheartening.
General McKenzie, though, I think we have his picture. He was the CENTCOM commander. I will say this. He's the one person that I know of who was in an influential position then who doesn't hold an influential position now. He left the Marine Corps. Do you think he was a casualty? All the other guys, Mark Milley, the Secretary of State, they all have their jobs. Do you think that his time was up anyway, or did it have something to do with, the obvious?
No, actually, I do believe his time was up. He was going to retire anyway. I think the difference is he didn't take a job on one of the government contracting firms like Secretary Austin did, like General Mattis did, like General Dunford did. Instead, he was offered a position in a college in Florida that they created their own department for General McKenzie. All these general officers are offered lucrative positions after they leave the Marine Corps or leave the military service. So, no, I do think it was his time to go, but it was unfortunate that we let him retire. He retired on April Fool's Day, as a matter of fact. And so there's probably some things that we should have done to hold him accountable before he left. But I think the only cost that he incurred was that he didn't get the lucrative government contracting positions that all the others got.
Well, you were talking about accountability a lot a year ago. You were frustrated, and you sat down at your desk and you made a video. Let's take a look.
People are upset because their senior leaders let them down, and none of them are raising their hands and accepting accountability or saying, we messed this up. Now, I'm not saying we've got to be in Afghanistan forever, but I am saying, did any of you throw your rank on the table and say, hey, it's a bad idea to evacuate Bagram Airfield, the strategic air base, before we evacuate everyone? Did anyone do that? And when you didn't think to do that, did anyone raise their hand and say, we completely messed this up? From my position, potentially all those people did die in vain if we don't have senior leaders that own up and raise their hand and say, we did not do this well.
So ultimately, as a result of that, maybe some other things, you went to the brig. You actually went to military prison for a little while. I think it was, a week or so? How long were you in there?
I was in a solitary cell for 9 days.
9 days. You left the Marine Corps finally, and I think in the end you thought you got a fair shake, at least as far as your case was handled.
The judge was very fair, so that was the one thing. But my discharge, they gave me the lowest that they could, despite 40 congressmen and women pleading on my behalf. Congressmen and women just seem to not really have any influence over the DOD. So, no, I can't go as far as to say that they were fair, but it was what I expected.
All right. So your book is coming out soon, right after Labor Day. Here we go. Crisis of Command, How We Lost Trust and Confidence in America's Generals and Politicians. Wow, what a topic. Very timely. How do you tackle that? That's a big one.
Well, the bumper sticker has been accountability, and I do think we need to signal to senior military officers that winning wars is important, which is what accountability is about. But accountability doesn't fix the systemic problems of why we're failing. And so that's what I try to explore in the book. So there's really two parts, but it transitions pretty seamlessly. It's how I became disenfranchised with the military over my 17 years. The entire time I was in the military, we were at war. And then I go into the micro, real, raw story of what happened to me after I posted that video, which reinforces the trends and the macro problems that are in the Marine Corps and the military as a whole. And then I end it with a punch list of 13 things that I think the military needs to do now, that the American people need to do now to hold the military accountable so that we can get this train back on the tracks.
Most people are not in the military. What can the people do? Give us one or two if you don't mind.
I think the people need to start talking to their congressional representatives, and I don't think congressional representatives should be authorizing a $750 billion budget, especially when we left $80 billion in Afghanistan. There wasn't a single congressional representative that said, hey, you guys want $750 billion? How about we take $80 billion off the top that you left in Afghanistan, unless you can give us 5 names of people that made mistakes and should be held accountable. But to do that would require courage, and right now, none of them have demonstrated that. So I think the American people should start talking to their elected representatives and asking them for courage as well.
What's next for you? You got this book. I think you made a lot of friends. You probably made a few enemies as well, given the fashion of your exit from the Marine Corps. What's next?
I'm going to promote the book pretty heavy through the holidays. I'm booked up. And then, once I get through the holidays and I evaluate it, I'm moving back to Ohio. And I'm not sure, my goal is to make a better America for my 3 sons. And I'd love to just work in a think tank. But at the end of the day, those people just write a paper and give them to the politicians. And the politicians, as I just described, are not doing what they're doing. So I don't want to be a politician, but there's a lot of reasons that are pulling me into it. And so we'll see what happens when I get through the holidays after promoting this book.
All right. Very good. Well, Stu Scheller, we appreciate it. Marine, thank you so much. To be continued.
Thanks, Greg.
You bet. You bet. We'll be right back.